Heaven, Purgatory, Hell, places of eternal destination. To which place will you go for all eternity? The Roman Catholic Church teaches these places are real as one passes beyond the veil of this earthly existence. Our guest today, Brian Hoyland, died. He met Jesus face to face. Jesus gave him 3 messages. Those messages are for us. I'm Jan Marie Halpin, your host, and our topic is Heaven, Purgatory, and Hell, your final destination. Our guest today is Brian Hoyland. Brian is an Army veteran, and he had a near-death experience. He served his country all over the world and suffered some injuries due to his service. He holds a master's degree in counseling psychology and currently works as a clinical therapist. Today, he will share his near-death experience, the messages that Jesus gave him, and how it changed his walk with Christ. Welcome to the program, Brian.
Hi, thank you very much.
It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Take us back to that fateful day in 2017 when you died.
Yeah, it was a shocking day for me. I started going to the heart failure. I was in end-stage chronic heart failure for several months already, but this one was a lot different. I felt like I was going to die. There was really nothing I could do. Everything I was trying wasn't working. Got taken into the emergency room. In there, they were trying to stabilize me for about 7 hours. And once they felt like they had me well enough that they could move me up to the ICU room, that's where they were going to take me. And this whole time I was just oppressed by fear. The pain was really intense, but the fear was so oppressive. It felt like I was being chewed up by it. I couldn't pray well. I kept thinking about all the things that I have done, and I couldn't come up with anything good. I couldn't think of anything that was worthy of going to heaven. And I kept thinking about all the things that I had done that were worthy of going to hell. And I just couldn't pray. It was as if I was being stunted in my ability to pray. And so I got brought up to the ICU room, and they transferred me from the ER bed to the ICU bed, and that's when it really got bad. All my organs were shutting down, including my lungs, so my respiratory system was starting to fail. I felt like my whole body was just under attack. My blood wasn't flowing because my heart wasn't pumping properly. I couldn't breathe, so it felt like I was suffocating. And all that fear was just sitting on top of me. But when they moved me to the bed, the only place I could see, because they brought in a whole bunch of medical professionals, they called it code blue, and the only spot that I could see was at my feet, and that was facing to the wall, and there was a crucifix on the wall. And I felt this inclination, like I should offer that up, because that was really my salvation is through the cross. And so I started to pray, and I asked Mary to help me, because I just couldn't do it myself. I was so afraid of everything that was happening. And as soon as I asked for Mary to help offer up her son's sacrifice, that's when I felt this surge of confidence. And it just overwhelmed me with like a comforting love that I could feel. I could feel the love of Jesus and Mary there the whole time. It wasn't like I didn't feel that, but the fear now was gone. Nothing else had changed. The pain was still there. I was still hurting, and I knew I was going to die. There was nothing else I could do.
How did you know you were going to die?
I just knew it was coming. I could feel it. It was like being in the jaws of some kind of a ravenous beast. And I just knew that my heart was giving out, and there was nothing else that was going to happen that could save me. I didn't feel like the doctors had any opportunity. There was nothing and the doctors, they were panicked. It was really like being, on those nature shows where you see animals like wolves ravenously eating beasts. That's kind of what I felt like. They were pulling my arms in different directions. They had me strapped down. Every once in a while I would get a shock to try to bring my heart rate down. But nothing was working. And yet that confidence, it felt so good. And it was hard to keep my eyes open. It was hard to talk. They kept asking me questions, and I didn't want to answer anymore. I just wanted to pray now that I could, and just be done with whatever the doctors had in store for me.
You knew you were close to death, so that's serious. And you wanted to make sure you were right with God. What was your relationship with Jesus at that time?
You know, my relationship was up and down. I always thought it was good. You know, I always thought that I did the right things and I was, living the right life. But it wasn't as if I put God first in everything. It was really that I had put myself first in just about everything that I had done. And that was hitting me really right in the face the whole time. I knew that was what was keeping me from having confidence. And I just felt like when I had asked for that intercession, that's when I knew that I had some help that was more than just coming from me, not anything selfish on my part. And it was just like an emptying of myself. And that's when I closed my eyes and I told the Lord I was ready to die and I was ready to come be with him. And I felt this intense pain come over my body and a shake and a pop as my soul exited my body. And then I was in a dark tunnel. And in this dark tunnel, I was looking into a void, like a big empty nothingness. And in that, I could feel like I was encompassed with love, and there was peace all around me. All the noise and chaos of the hospital room was now silent. So everything was just beautifully silent. But at the same time, that dark void had this call. It's kind of alluring, trying to tell me that everything was great, everything was comfortable, to be content and just be there in the nothing. And I had this increased rush of intelligence. Like every memory that I had, every thought, every idea, everything that I learned, everything was there for me. It was as if I had access to everything that I had ever experienced in life. But with that, I knew that the love wasn't coming from that dark void. So there was something menacing about it. There was something kind of sinister about that dark void, trying to compel me to go into it.
Do you feel that was the devil or demons?
I think it was, but because it felt compelling. It wasn't coming from the love. It was totally separated. And when I was there, I certainly felt that way. And I had all those thoughts, like I said, but it was this one thought that really predominated, and it was that this couldn't be it. And it wasn't just that I was saying this can't be it, but it was that I didn't want any kind of existence, even with the love and peace, if I didn't have Jesus. And as soon as I said that, I realized that I was seeing this light behind me. In fact, at this point, I realized I could see in 360 degrees. And my vision was so magnified that I could see the dark void. I could see the light behind me. And if I was looking at you, I could see the front of you. I could see the back of you. I could see the cameraman, the front and back of him. I could see everything that was going on without any kind of limitations, all at the same time. So that was really impressive because I felt I needed to turn to look at the light, which I really didn't need to, because as soon as I actually did turn, I could see the dark void still behind me. It didn't ever go out of my view. But what I could feel about my body as I was doing this is that I was just a spirit. I didn't have a physical body. But I didn't feel like I was oozing all over the place. I felt contained by something nurturing and loving. I didn't see Mary, but I felt like that she was holding me as I was standing there.
That's beautiful.
It was wonderful. It felt the same as when I had prayed and asked her for her intercession.
Were you very devoted to her during your life?
Yeah, I really was. But after I got my master's degree, I really kind of fell away from things. I didn't pray my rosary as often. When I first converted to Catholicism, I found the rosary to be a wonderful tool, something that really brought me closer to the Lord. And I had to really overcome a lot of Protestant thinking because Mary was not something that we often talked about when I was growing up. So I did feel very strongly connected to her, but I had gotten away because I got so caught up in my career and my life, but I could feel that her love as I was standing there looking at this light. And the light was far away. It seemed like it was just an eternity away. But it was so brilliant, so magnificent. And I remember that I said, I want to be with that light. And there was something that was impelling me towards the light. It was like just something beautiful that was calling me to that, not trying to trick me or try to force me. I felt like it was my own internal desire, but it was an impelling feeling that I wanted to be with that light. And as soon as I had said that, I was there. I was right with the light.
So it was like God was respecting your free will.
Yes, the whole time. This is a theme that I found throughout my experience there, is that I would ask for something and then it would be granted to me. And it was not that I was ever forced into anything. So I didn't feel like I had to be in submission, but I wanted to be. I could feel my soul was genuflecting this whole time. But it was impressive because I didn't feel any kind of like G-force or acceleration as I was moving. I was there instantly, but I also didn't feel wind on my face. So it was really impressive that I could move that quickly and yet still remember every step I took.
So do you think you were moving by your thoughts?
Everything was intellectual there. I didn't have a physical body, so I didn't feel like I was taking steps, but I did feel like I had actually seen every step that I had taken. So everything there was intellectual. Even my communication, when I was talking, there was nothing audible. I didn't have any kind of verbal communication, but it was just these thoughts that I was having.
So telepathic?
Very much, yeah. And it was so connected to that love. And so when I'm standing before the light, I'm looking in every direction, all at the same time as I'm looking at the light. And it was cool because I was looking at this far in the light as my vision was growing. It was almost like traveling in a vehicle. And you travel in a vehicle or in a plane, you can see that you're traveling. You can watch your vision as it's going. But that's how it was for me. I was looking in all these directions, and it was endless. There was no end to this light. It was just
Did you know that it was God?
I did. And as soon as I recognized that it was God, that I actually had that thought about it, that's when I heard the voice of God saying, "You can come in." So, of course, I went right into the light.
So whose voice was it? God the Father or Jesus?
I think it was the Father, because it was different. It was a different impression that I had than when I did meet Jesus later on. But it was, I didn't see God's face, or I didn't see a physical form of him. So I don't know if the light was just his love and his radiance, but it was definitely God interacting with me.
How did that make you feel? Were you frightened, or did you feel peaceful?
No, I wasn't frightened. I would have been had he been angry, but he had been softened. And it felt like it was when I had asked Mary for her intercession that everything was softened, that I actually had his attention, that I didn't feel like he was ignoring me or
that you were getting ready to have a final judgment.
Yeah, it really was. This was something more intimate and beautiful that I was feeling. But I would have been terrified had he been angry with me. There was something though that was freeing about it. And as I was in the light, I felt this rush of love and peace. But the love was like a river. It was like rushing into me. And when I say that, I mean I was like drinking out of a straw. You know how you drink out of a straw and there's liquid down in the cup, and it goes into the straw and then into your mouth, and never leaves the straw empty, but it always goes. Imagine if you had an endless cup, and that's what this love felt like.
Wow.
It was totally endless. So I was constantly going to be filled for all of eternity with this love, constantly going through me, and it was never depleted. So there was just this endless amount of love that was rushing into me. And while I was doing that, it was like shaving off all the hurt and resentment and just every bit of sorrow that I had experienced in life. And I was realizing how wonderful that his love was. It was mending those broken places in me. And so as I'm seeing this, I realized that my thoughts were like they are as for humans. We have all these memories and thoughts and ideas. We don't recall them all at the same time. We might not think of something for many years. But that's not how God's thought was. God's thought was just one thought, and everything that was created, everything in history, every thought or idea that me and you have or memory that we have was all contained in that thought. And it was the Word of God. It was Jesus. That's his thought. And when I realized that, I said, I want to see Jesus. And as soon as I said that, the light opened up, and there was this vast amount of beings in this room. And this room was so much larger than that dark void. You could have fit several dark voids inside this room. And the beings, I've never seen 1 trillion, but I would imagine that, that could be a number I could label on it. there was just so many beings that I couldn't even grasp how many there were, but I could see, again, the front and back of everyone. And in the middle of this group of beings, there was Jesus. I could see that he was so much more resplendent. He was the same magnificent as the light. That's how dazzling, beautifully lit up he was.
You just knew it was him.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, my intellect was so much higher than it is now, and it was wonderful to be able to see him, and I knew it was him. But everything that I had was geared towards Jesus. Even from going from the dark void coming in, it seemed like a beeline right towards Jesus.
And who were the other entities? Were they angelic or human?
I think a mixture of both. It was as if they went off into the periphery, though. What I was seeing with them at first was just dazzling light, really beautiful light, but almost like a reflection off of what they were seeing with Jesus. So I think that's what it was. I'm not really sure, but it seemed as if that's what they were doing, is reflecting his light. And it was varying degrees. Not everybody had the same amount of light, but it was as if that's what they were doing. And so I knew that Jesus was the source of that love, that river of love that was flowing into me. And so as I'm looking at him, I said, Jesus, I want to see your face. And again, he answered it, and he let me see his face. And as it came together, all the other beings, I could see their physical forms, but everything kind of went off into the periphery because I was so fixated on Jesus. So the only thing that I can really remember is seeing Jesus. Everything else is kind of a blur or a distant memory to me, but Jesus was structured into my mind. It was emblazoned there. And so as his face had come together, I was seeing his features and seeing what he looked like, but I couldn't lay it down in my memory. And what happened was kind of like those old books where you flip the pages, you got a little cartoon on it, and it barely moves on the next page, but as you flip it fast, it looks like it's really moving. That's kind of how it was with Jesus' face, except what my brain was remembering was this dazzling light. It was just flooding into my mind, and it was palpable. I mean, I could feel it. It was where the peace was emanating from. It was as if the love was emanating from his heart. And I could feel that connection with him, as if everything about me was starting to transform and to allow him to be inside of me and to just take possession of me. And then we started to do my life review. And all my thoughts were already there, but I was going through everything that I had done, and I was being taught what was wrong about them. And everything that I had done was really traced back to my pride. Everything that I had done wrong was usually because I wanted something different, or I didn't want something that I think I didn't deserve, or just everything was based on a selfishness and twisted. And I started to realize that nothing good really came from me except for what God had given me. And all this was happening at the same time. And the whole time he's staring at me and smiling.
I'm curious, was he making the life review happen, or were you making it happen?
It felt like I was making it happen. And it was as if I was going through these things that were troubling. I think he was helping me to learn from them, and he was healing me from the damage that I had done to myself. And really it was that feeling of emptying myself of that pride, of those sins, and just holding on to him.
So he was teaching you a lesson through the life
Absolutely. The whole time I was there, it seems like when I tell the story, it seems like it's happening in this continuum, but it was almost as if everything was happening all at once. And so it gets kind of confusing to explain it, but except in the more linear continuum. But what was really impressive was how he was just emanating his love to me. Despite all the things that I had done, it was as if he had forgiven me for them. But as I was doing this, everything that I was seeing how it hurt him in his passion, how he had to suffer for my sins. Now I realized that he did suffer for everybody, but I could see what mine did done to him.
How did that make you feel?
It was tough. That was a really difficult thing to see that, but it made me despise those sins. It made me want to just totally detach from everything and and allow him to have full control of me. I'm not a submissive person. I don't submit to anybody in my life. I've just never been that way. And yet here I was so submissive, and it wasn't as if I lost who I was. He didn't take that away from me. I still felt as if I was me, but a better me. And it was his love that was really making that me better. And so while it did bother me that I had done all these things, the lesson that I was learning was helping me to learn how to get out of my own way. And so I remembered a prayer that I had prayed when I was 6 years old, and around 6 years old, I guess. My great-grandmother had died, and everybody in my family, all the people I loved, were sad, and they were crying. And I remembered I just didn't want to impose any kind of feeling like that on people while I was alive, by my death particularly. So I had prayed about it for a long time that night, and I remembered feeling like that prayer was answered. And as I was thinking about that, it was almost as if I was asking Jesus, hey, did this really happen? And he said that he had remembered it, and that he did grant that prayer, and that I could still have it. But he asked me, why would I want to go back? And it wasn't simply, why would you want to not be here in heaven? Which it did contain that, but it was more than just that. It was him asking me what would be my purpose for going back.
He was giving you a choice.
Yeah, he was definitely giving me a choice.
So you could have stayed in heaven if you wanted to?
Well, I don't know if I would have stayed in heaven or had to go to purgatory, but it was certainly not going to go the other way back to that dark void. So I felt that, he's so loving. He's not going to do anything that would jeopardize me. I also kind of feel like my salvation is secured as long as I follow what he had told me to do. But I knew that he loved me so much that he wouldn't let me just arbitrarily risk everything by going back.
Yet he asked you the question, do you want to go back?
Yes, he still asked it though. And
what did you say?
Well, I started to think, and again, this is where I really think that purgatory would have to be something in store for me, because it went to my pride again. Like, I started to think, well, my family needs me. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Families do need each other. But it was something that he showed me, that he loved them more than I love them, which is hard for me to even believe as I sit here. I love my family so much. But he really does love them more than I do. So that wasn't just the reason to go back, because he still was going to take care of them. So I thought, what about other people, all the good I could do? And that wasn't it either. And I realized that the reason I wanted to go back was to do more for him, to glorify him more, to show him more love because of the love that I was feeling. Not even for a reward in heaven. It wasn't that I wanted to go back because I thought I could gain something better in heaven. I wanted to go back because of that love that I felt from him. It overwhelmed me. It was so powerful that I would have done anything for it. And that's when I realized that I had to just die to myself. I had to get rid of that pride and just let him be the whole light of my life.
He was allowing you, Brian, to come to that conclusion.
Yes, absolutely. So it was wonderful. I felt so connected to him at this point. And during that whole time, he's teaching me, but the three things that he taught me was that I had to pray more. And when he showed me the model for praying, it validated something that I knew, and I think most Catholics do know, is that the best model for prayer is the Blessed Virgin Mary. Her whole life was a prayer. Everything that she did, every action that she did, every thought she had, everything about her was focused on Jesus. That's the only thing she cared about. And if we live our lives that way, I'm guaranteed that I was going to be in connection with the Lord.
Our Lord Jesus gave you 3 messages: pray more, suffer joyfully, and share his love. So did he say it was just for you personally?
No.
Or you share it with everyone?
He was talking to me personally, but it certainly was something that this is how all people can validate their purpose, because there is nothing in life that doesn't come from him. So if we live our lives for him, then that is our purpose, no matter what comes our way. And that leads into the second thing that he taught me, is to suffer joyfully. And this is something that is really hard for a lot of people to grasp. It certainly was hard for me as well. But to suffer is something that seems contrary to our human nature. You know, we want to get out from underneath of suffering. We want to try to avoid it at all costs. If we're running a marathon and our leg starts to hurt, we're going to take it aside and try to stretch ourselves out or try to loosen up, do something to try to make it feel better. But what it was about was that what comes our way isn't always something that we can control. I certainly couldn't control my heart failure. I couldn't control my death. Those things were coming anyway. And as I was watching the whole experience, I saw how Jesus had to carry his cross. And we all have crosses, very different ones, but we have crosses.
And didn't Jesus say, take up your cross and follow me? So that is a part of Christianity.
Absolutely.
And he did die on the cross for our sins.
And you know what's interesting is that's what he was teaching me. He was teaching me that very lesson with his own passion. Is he didn't need to die. He died for us. It was a free gift to us. And my going back was to give myself to him freely, to just accept him as fully my Lord and Savior, not just when I felt that it was convenient, or at the end of my life say, oh yeah, by the way, Jesus, I really want to follow you. This was something more profound, and to really get out of my own way and say, I'm gonna do what God wants, whatever he puts me in, whatever position I find myself in. I'm just gonna try to do as much as I can for him, to honor him. And that's what suffering joyfully is to just accept the things that we have. It doesn't mean we don't try to use our rationale and try to avoid drowning if we're going to drown or something along those lines. But we've got to be willing to accept a lot of things that we would normally not be willing to take, particularly swallowing my pride and allowing other people to make a choice and not always wanting my way. And for me, that's certainly a big suffering.
Especially when you saw how in your life review, how some things you had done had hurt other people and had a ripple effect.
A big ripple effect.
Talk about that.
It was really impressive to see how vast that connection is between all of us. And the one thing that I do really is going to affect that other person, and then who knows where they go with it. And I did see how that had that ripple effect, particularly not standing up for somebody when I should. Little things that you often just totally disregard. Being mean when you didn't need to be, and could have avoided it just because I thought, well, somebody shouldn't treat me that way. But I didn't have any kind of regard for that person and what they might have been experiencing at the time. And you can see when you're there how a person might treat you kind of in a grumpy manner, but they really had something else more serious going on in their life. It wasn't about you. It was about what was happening to them. And I just added pain to their life.
And the Lord showed you that, right?
He showed me all of that. And that's where it was I kept going back to my pride, is that I would be feeling wounded by this person when they weren't even intending to do it. They were wounded themselves. And I added something to it just because of my pride. So the suffering joyfully was really something of just getting out of my own way, to really denying myself and following him, to pick up that cross. If it felt like somebody was, hurting me, I can let that go. I don't have to take that with me. And the pain is gone for me anyway, but it also doesn't add pain to that other person.
That's a very important lesson, because what you're saying is that Jesus was showing you that everybody has their cross. Everyone has their suffering. But to have that empathy, to have that compassion, and to step back for a moment and say, what would Jesus do?
Right. And that's what led me into the third thing, was to share his love. And that's really the emphasis of the whole reason for me to come back, was to share that love that he has been giving me. And that's the way I get to hold on to his love. I don't feel that I can gain that kind of love without giving myself freely to him. And often that comes in the form of other people.
Love one another as I have loved you.
Yeah, and it really has a strong connection to him, because we are so connected. He loves every single one of us. So if I'm going to share his love, and that's really what he wanted me to do, he wanted me to share his love, this is the way to do it, is to sometimes sacrifice my own desires and needs for somebody else and to tell them about him, to not be afraid to share his love, to share who he is. It's something that I think is often really hard for people to do because they feel like the world will judge them. And, I kind of felt like that too, particularly in my profession. It's not really okay to talk about Christianity. You can talk about just about any other faith or idea, but Christianity, for some reason, really draws a negative connotation with professionals in my field. And that's something that I'm not afraid of any longer because there really is no other love than comes from Jesus.
Amen. So would you say Jesus gave you the gift to overcome human respect?
Yes, that's absolutely probably the biggest part of my pride was how I appeared to other people. And I don't know that I really care that much anymore. I still have to check myself. I still have to catch myself in it because it's a really pervasive illness to have pride. And so it tries to sneak up on me. If I find myself getting irritable, I realize, well, something's probably triggering my pride, and I have to go and figure that out. And often the irritability will go away. But what I do is I look at that inner peace. Once it gets disturbed, once I start to feel that disturbing sensation in my soul, that's when I know I'm starting to drift off a little bit. And I just start praying. And I really do try to live my life as a life of prayer. I want to serve other people. I want to be a kind person all of the time, just so that whoever I come in contact with has something positive that they are able to feel from God's love.
That's beautiful. Did Jesus give you any specific thoughts or ways that he wanted you to show his love?
He didn't say anything specific, but he did want me to show it at all times to all people, and particularly the most disadvantaged. People who often need that love, and it can come from a lot of different sources. But when I had gotten all of those messages, when all that sunk in, that's when he told me. It was almost as if he handed me my coat and said, "Here's the door." He said, "Now it's time to go back." And it wasn't in a rough manner or disregard, like, "Hey, get out of here." It was more of like that confidence, like, you can do this. And I really felt like he was on my side, that I knew he was going to be with me every step of my rest of my life for however long I get. He told me that he was going to give me a new heart, and I didn't realize that he actually was going to give me a new one than the one I already had. So I had a heart transplant, but I thought he was going to miraculously heal my heart and turn it into a better version of it. He ended up taking it, but what he did is he did give me a new heart. It's a heart that's in my soul that just wants to serve him and not myself anymore. And so as I'm starting to leave, the vision of heaven, of that big huge room now was closed off, and I was in the light. And as I came through the light, I could see my tunnel. But at the end of my tunnel was no longer that dark void. It was the hospital room, and I was looking at it from the view as if I was laying in the bed. So I could see right behind my head, kind of looking out through my eyes. And I could see what was happening in the hospital room. I could see that they had this big green machine on me. It was doing chest compressions, and I had ended up getting broken ribs from it. All these things I was able to see as I was coming back. I saw how they had me hooked up to oxygen, some things on my head, and the doctors were really concerned. It looked as if maybe that they were even thinking about calling it soon. But I snapped back into my body, and as soon as I did, I spontaneously revived. My body tried to go up as much as I could, but I was hooked up to a lot of things, and I instantly asked the doctor, "Did I just die?" Because from a psychology geek, I really had never believed in near-death experiences, so this was something new to me. And yet I wanted to have that medical confirmation that I actually died and didn't have an out-of-body experience. And the doctor had to come closer to be able to hear what I was trying to say. And so I asked him again, and he said, "Yeah, you just died."
So there you go, a medical confirmation that you were dead for 10 minutes, right?
For 10 minutes. It was incredible. And I didn't have that fear. That fear didn't come back. It was as if that fear was still present. It was outside the door, though. It was just distant from me. I didn't feel that oppressive fear anymore. The pain was more intense. I felt that very strongly, but it didn't affect me. It was as if I still felt like Jesus was there and he was on my side.
So he gave you the grace to endure the suffering.
To absolutely endure it. It's almost as if it really is a joy to me. It was as if I realized that everything that I endure can lead to my salvation if I choose to allow him to help me through it. And if that's what I have to do to go to heaven, I bring it on. It's a wonderful thing to have the Lord there with you. And I've never felt closer to him than when I've been needing him the most. It's usually when I drift away when things are going really well and things are really positive in my life. And I start to pat myself on the back and give myself a lot of credit. And I realized I didn't want to fall back into that trap. So he's been blessing me with a lot of different graces, but that grace to be able to endure suffering is probably the greatest one.
Brian, getting back to your life review, was that something that other people could see as well?
Yeah, everybody could see it. And I could see everything that had happened too. So I didn't have anything limited to me. Nothing was hidden from me. Everything was exposed. But I was reviewing my life. I wasn't really reviewing everybody else's. Everybody else's was kind of in the periphery for me. So I don't remember anything about you or anyone else. I just remembered all the things that I did, but everybody was seeing what I did.
Did you feel embarrassed that other people were seeing your sins?
At first I did, but I felt more shame for what I had done. It was more internal than even the embarrassment of other people. And it was because there was so much support and love. Everybody there had their own sins that they were all sorry for. People were supporting me. There was love. It wasn't total. Nobody was trying to shame me, but I did feel shame, and yet that shame was getting shaved off along with those other resentments and angers and anything else that I had in my life. But it was that peace coming from Jesus' face, that love coming from his heart that was removing that shame, and that was the lowering of my pride. It was him taking and teaching me how to live differently, and that what I had done was based on my own sinfulness, and that I was now sorry for it. And he was helping me to move past that shame and more into remorse for my sins and away from that guilt. And that was really healing. It was something that really healed my soul.
So coming back into your body, your resolution would be to avoid those faults and sins you saw in your life review.
At all costs. Sometimes I'll go to confession simply just because I felt irritated while I was driving to work. And, it's because I recognize that just leads me down the path to where I'm going to keep falling into that pride. Pride is pervasive. It's a tricky thing because it's always part of who we are to want to focus on our point of view. I mean, how else do we get through life if we don't have some direction? But it's surrendering the outcome. It's surrendering the need to control how things happen. So if somebody cuts me off, I don't have to get angry about it. Usually that person's not thinking about me anyway. So I don't have to personalize that action. And that's something very different. That's something that I normally would have been very upset that somebody, how dare they have the audacity to cut me off.
So how do you handle it now?
Well, I pray if I start to get that feeling, because I am human, so I still have my body still does war against me. But I really just offer it up to God. I offer that sacrifice and say, you know what, I'm going to let this humiliation. Matter of fact, I ended up having a guy who cut me off, and he started yelling at me at a stoplight because apparently I had gone, I did go through a red light. I didn't see anybody, so I'll be the first one to admit that I did do it though. But he was really upset about it, and so I rolled my window down. I told him I didn't want to wreck your day. I didn't see you and didn't cut him off. He was driving too fast. But I just kept telling him that I didn't try to wreck his day. And, it was humiliating because he was yelling all kinds of things at me. But he kept softening. And I could see how just my interaction with him softened him. And every time I just kept apologizing for my part in it. Not what he did, but I didn't accuse him. I just kept apologizing for my part. And he kept softening to the point where he apologized for what he had done.
Wow.
And as we were leaving, the green light happens, and he's like, I wish everybody would just handle things like this. I said, so do I. And we both felt good. So I was able to help in that situation to restore what I had caused for a bad day. And for me, it felt really good because it validated that I don't have to be the one to always fight for my way. And that's something that only could have come from God, because certainly it didn't come from my nature.
Brian, the love that you shared was really the love that you experienced from Jesus. And that was transferred to that man.
Yeah, it's amazing that we don't understand love. We talk about love. I love my children. Everybody loves their children and other people in their lives. And we even love activities, but we don't understand love when it comes to what God is. And He is love. He is every essence of it. We get like a little sliver of it. That's what we understand. We really are basically babies when it comes to understanding the magnitude of His love. But His love will overcome everything. And it overcame me, it overcame my pride. Everything that I was experiencing as I was doing my life review was overwhelmed by His love. I could feel His love just permeating into my soul. And that's what I showed to that man. I felt that connection to Jesus. I felt like I was getting out of my way and that I was letting Him take control. And by Him doing that, I had this wonderful experience with a stranger, that was really angry at me. And I was able to keep control of my anger and not let it rise up because I simply surrendered to God. And I let His love conquer it all.
See, nonprofit ministry. Thank you, and may our Lord Jesus Christ richly bless you.